What if one of the most brilliant minds in psychology left us a final warning? And we've been ignoring it all along. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Let that sink in. He wasn't talking about random thoughts or vague emotions. He was talking about the shadow, the darker, hidden parts of ourselves we refuse to see. And according to Jung, if we don't confront it, that inner darkness takes over silently, shaping our lives, our choices, and even entire societies. Now here's the chilling part. Jung's final warning wasn't about external threats. It wasn't about war politics or the collapse of economies. It was about the collapse from within. This video dives deep into that warning, how Jung foresaw the psychological patterns that are now playing out across the world: rising division, emotional numbness, inner emptiness, and the return of tribalism. Things we're witnessing every day in the news, and maybe even in our own families. But what exactly did Jung warn us about? And more importantly, why are most people still ignoring it? Is it possible that the chaos we're experiencing today is the exact shadow Jung tried to prepare us for decades ago? Stick around, because we're about to explore how this forgotten warning could change not only how you see the world, but how you see yourself. Because maybe the real danger isn't out there. Maybe it's what we've refused to face inside. Carl Jung wasn't just a psychologist, he was a seer of the psyche. And what he warned us about decades ago, we're living through right now. He didn't speak in the language of doom or prophecy. He spoke in symbols, in archetypes, in the quiet truths that most people are too distracted or too afraid to hear. So what was his final warning? Jung believed that every human being carries a shadow, a dark hidden side of the personality that we suppress, deny, or ignore. It's made up of all the parts of ourselves we don't want to face: our jealousy, rage, shame, greed, and fear. And here's the danger. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung wrote, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In other words, if we don't deal with our own darkness, it will deal with us. But Jung's warning went far beyond the individual. He was deeply concerned about what happens when entire societies refuse to face their collective shadow. When people suppress their fears, frustrations, and unresolved traumas, those energies don't disappear. They build. They swell beneath the surface. And eventually, they erupt. Not in healthy, healing ways, but in destructive patterns. War, hatred, mass hysteria, the rise of authoritarianism, emotional numbness, moral decay. To Jung, these weren't just political or economic problems. They were psychological symptoms, the result of a civilization losing touch with its soul. Think about the world we're living in today. Rising polarization, outrage addiction, a constant flood of fear-based news, social media echo chambers, mental health crises everywhere. Doesn't it feel like something is boiling underneath? Or that's exactly what Jung saw coming. He believed that if we failed to do the inner work, if we refused to confront our own inner demons, those shadows will begin to show up in the outer world, in our leaders, in our ideologies, in our communities, even in our families. The shadow, he said, doesn't go away just because you pretend it's not there. It becomes projected onto the other, onto people who look different, vote different, or believe different. We begin to scapegoat, to dehumanize, to demonize. And once that starts, the path to violence becomes frighteningly short. But Jung was not trying to frighten us. He was trying to wake us up, because he knew that the shadow, when faced with courage and honesty, is not an enemy. It's a gateway. It's the door to personal transformation and collective healing. He wrote that the shadow is 90% pure gold because within our darkest traits lie the keys to our greatest growth. But we'll never find them if we keep running. So here's the question. Have you met your shadow? Most people haven't. Not really. We keep busy, we scroll, we drink, we blame. We distract ourselves just enough to stay numb. We don't stop long enough to ask, why am I triggered by this person? Why do I repeat this same toxic pattern? Why do I feel empty even when life looks fine on the outside? Jung would say, these are clues. The unconscious is always speaking. In your dreams, in your conflicts, in your anxiety, in the moments when your reaction feels bigger than the situation. It's not trying to ruin you. It's trying to reveal you. And that's the invitation behind Jung's warning to stop running, to stop pretending, to turn toward your inner world, especially the parts that make you uncomfortable. Because only when you face the unconscious can you begin to integrate it. And only through integration can you become truly whole. And here's the bigger picture. Jung believed that the survival of humanity depends on this kind of inner work. Yes, governments matter. Policies matter. But at the end of the day, the most powerful revolution is psychological. He wrote, the world hangs on a thin thread, and that thread is the psyche of man. That's how fragile things are. One mind, one heart, one shadow at a time, shaping the collective fate of our planet. That's why this isn't just philosophy. This is urgent. Because if we don't meet our darkness now, we risk passing it on to our children, our systems, our culture. We risk living in a world built by unhealed wounds. But imagine the opposite. Imagine a world where people take responsibility for their inner lives, where conflict is approached with awareness, not projection, where leaders are psychologically mature, where education includes emotional intelligence and shadow work. That world starts with individuals, with you, with me, with the courage to ask the hard questions, to feel the uncomfortable emotions, to make the unconscious conscious before it becomes our fate. So maybe Jung's warning wasn't a final word after all. Maybe it was a call to action. And the question now is, are we ready to listen? If you've ever looked around at the state of the world and thought, something feels off, you're not imagining it. Everywhere we look, there's rising tension, violence on the streets, political polarization, social outrage, people feeling more isolated and disconnected than ever. And underneath it all, there's a low, constant hum of anxiety, like we're living on the edge of something, but we don't know what. Carl Jung would have had a word for this. Shadow. But here's the thing, Jung didn't see the shadow as just an individual problem. Yes, it lives within each of us, but when entire societies repress their inner truth, the shadow doesn't disappear. It builds until it breaks through, not as healing, but as chaos. Let's break this down. 1. Collective anger, projection, and division. Have you noticed how people seem quicker to rage these days? How online discussions turn into vicious fights, and how entire communities are splintered by political or social views. That's not just bad communication. It's projection. When we haven't dealt with our inner frustrations, our fear, our grief, we start projecting it onto others. That's Psychology 101, and it's happening at scale. Jung warned that the unacknowledged shadow will always find a way to surface, especially when triggered by fear or uncertainty. We start blaming the other side, demonizing those who disagree with us, and refusing to see any humanity in people who think differently. This is exactly how the shadow operates. It divides. It thrives on unconscious emotion, and it pulls entire groups into patterns of hatred and blame rather than reflection and understanding. Ask yourself, how often do we pause to question our own reactions versus instantly reacting in defense, too? The rise of extremism and authoritarian thinking. Jung lived through World War I and witnessed the psychological buildup to World War II. He saw firsthand how a society under collective fear and repression can give rise to authoritarian figures, leaders who embody the collective shadow of a population desperate for control, order, and identity. He warned the people, always choose the most dangerous man in the room when they are unconscious of their own fear. Does that sound familiar? Across the world, we're seeing the return of black and white thinking, us versus them, pure versus corrupt, my tribe versus yours. In that state, people are more willing to trade personal freedom for the illusion of safety, especially if a charismatic figure offers simple answers to complex problems. This isn't just politics. This is psychology at scale. Jung believed that if we ignore the shadow, we unconsciously seek it out in others, especially in powerful, polarizing figures who seem to say what we're really thinking even when what they say is dangerous or extreme. We're not choosing solutions. We're choosing projections. 3. Mental health crises and emotional disconnection. Let's talk about what's happening inside people, not just out there in the world. Depression, anxiety, burnout, emotional numbness. It's everywhere. And it's not just a chemical imbalance or a screen time problem. It's a soul imbalance. Jung believed that when we lose touch with our inner lives, our dreams, our values, our deeper purpose, we begin to feel fragmented, lost, disconnected not only from others, but from ourselves. Modern society pushes productivity, performance, and perfection, but rarely encourages introspection, silence, or emotional honesty. And in that gap, the shadow thrives. We bury our pain. We distract ourselves with noise. We avoid feeling anything too deep. But underneath, our unresolved inner world keeps pulling at us through dreams, through anxiety, through the strange feeling that something is missing. Jung would say the shadow is knocking. And the more we ignore it, the more it starts expressing itself in symptoms, addictions, obsessions, overreactions, emotional numbness, or in some cases, complete emotional shutdown. It's not that we're weak. It's that we're spiritually starved. 4. The moral collapse of culture. Now let's zoom out. Have you noticed how hard it is to talk about ethics, truth, or meaning without triggering defensiveness or being labeled? Jung saw this coming. He warned that when societies abandon inner truth in favor of outer appearances, image status materialism, they begin to decay from within. Morality becomes performative. Truth becomes relative. And the soul, the individual soul, is no longer central. He wrote, the loss of connection to the self leads to a rise in meaningless. Today we see that everywhere, people chasing external success but feeling hollow inside. The pressure to present a perfect life on social media while struggling silently. Spirituality turned into hashtags, outrage turned into branding. And still, that deeper question lingers beneath it all. Who am I? Really, the shadow is the part of us that answers, let me show you. But only if you're ready to look. 5. So, what do we do? Jung never left us without hope. He believed that the only way out of this shadow-driven cycle is through radical self-awareness. Not just individually, but collectively. It starts with asking better questions. What triggers me and why? It continues with listening to our dreams. What is my unconscious trying to tell me? It grows with curiosity. What do I judge harshly in others? And is that a mirror? We can't stop the world from being chaotic overnight. but we can start with ourselves. Because the more you integrate your own shadow, the less you need to project it onto others. The less reactive you become, the more conscious, grounded, and compassionate you grow. And when enough people do that, that's how societies shift. Not through mass control, but through mass awakening. So maybe the violence, division, and disconnection we're seeing today aren't just symptoms of a broken world. Maybe they're the shadow calling us back to ourselves, calling us to wake up, to stop pretending we're fine, to stop blaming everyone else, and to start facing the truth we've buried inside. The real war isn't between us and them. It's between who we are and who we're afraid to become. By now, you may be wondering if Carl Jung's warning was so clear. If his message about the shadow, the unconscious, and the danger of avoidance was so profound, why didn't we listen? Why are we still falling into the same emotional traps, collective chaos, and spiritual confusion that he warned us about almost a century ago? The answer isn't because people are evil or ignorant. It's because what Jung asked us to do is hard. He didn't tell us to fix the world. He told us to fix ourselves. And that's exactly what most of us don't want to do. 1. Modern life trains us to look away. Let's be honest. We live in a world that's optimized for speed stimulation and surface-level satisfaction. Everything is instant. Everything is external. We scroll, click, binge, consume. We jump from one dopamine hit to the next, like a text, a purchase, a video. Our lives are louder than ever, but inwardly, we've never been more disconnected. Because the moment we slow down, the moment we sit in silence, the moment we're alone with our thoughts, something uncomfortable starts to rise. And that's where the shadow lives. It's in the silence. It's in the stillness. It's in the parts of ourselves we've been trained to avoid. So what do we do instead? We distract. We stay busy. We stay online. We stay in motion because we're afraid that if we ever stop, we might have to feel something real. Jung understood this better than anyone. He believed that the biggest threat to our humanity wasn't technology, politics, or even war. It was our refusal to confront our inner world. He once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And when you look around, doesn't it feel like that's exactly what's happening? 2. Why facing ourselves is so terrifying. Let's go deeper. Why is it so hard to look inward? Because we know at some level that what we find there might not be pretty. We might have to face the anger we've buried since childhood, the shame we've been avoiding for decades, the truth about how we've treated others or ourselves, the dreams we abandoned, the patterns we keep repeating, the wounds we never healed. That's heavy. And for most people, the choice is simple. It's easier to numb than to notice. It's easier to blame others than to take responsibility. It's easier to keep performing, pleasing, escaping, than to sit quietly and say, who am I really? And what part of me have I been running from? But Jung knew that healing doesn't happen by avoiding pain. It happens by moving through it. And if we don't, that pain doesn't disappear. It leaks out in our relationships, in our addictions, in our fears, in our inability to feel fully alive. 3. The cultural lie of constant happiness. Here's another layer. Modern culture sells us a myth that we're supposed to be happy all the time. And if you're not, something must be wrong with you. So what do? We self-medicate with perfection. We curate our lives online. We pretend everything's fine, even when we're barely holding it together. Because society tells us that darkness is weakness, that emotional discomfort is a problem to fix, not a message to hear. But Jung would say the exact opposite. He believed that our darkness is where the gold is, that our discomfort is where the truth begins, that our wounds are the path to awakening. But no one wants to go there. Not because we're shallow, but because we've been conditioned to avoid pain at all costs. And when avoidance becomes a lifestyle, inner work becomes impossible. The price we're paying. So what's the cost of all this distraction, all this avoidance? It's not just individual. Yes, people are depressed, anxious, and burned out. But look wider. We've created a culture of emotional illiteracy, where people don't know how to process grief, where anger turns into violence, where sadness becomes addiction, where silence feels like danger. We've lost touch with the language of the soul, and when that happens, we lose our way. Jung believed that a society that refuses inner work will collapse outwardly, not through fire and brimstone, but through meaninglessness, through disconnection, through a loss of center. And isn't that what we're seeing? So many people searching for something but not knowing what. Filling the void with stuff, with noise, with identity battles. All the while the shadow waits patiently. To 5. So what now? Jung's warning wasn't meant to shame us. It was meant to wake us up. He wasn't saying you're broken. He was saying you are deeper than you've ever dared to explore. And the moment you choose to look inward, even just a little, something changes. You begin to reclaim your energy. You stop reacting to everything. You start seeing patterns that were invisible before. And you begin to feel whole. Because integration is not about perfection. It's about honesty. It's about compassion. It's about becoming who you truly are, not just who you've been pretending to be. But it requires courage. The courage to face yourself. The courage to slow down. The courage to say, I don't want to live on autopilot anymore. I want to know who I am beneath the noise. And that choice is rare. But it's powerful. Because one person doing deep inner work can ripple outward. In their relationships, in their family, in their community, in the collective psyche. And maybe that's how we start to change the world, not by fixing everything out there, but by healing what's in here. So if you've ever felt like something is missing, if you've ever sensed there's more to life than just surviving, scrolling, and striving, that's your soul speaking. That's your shadow knocking. And Jung's warning, it's not too late to listen. The door to self-awareness is always open. The only question is, will you walk through it? We've talked about the shadow. We've explored why Carl Jung's warning has been ignored. And we've seen how the cost of that avoidance is playing out across the modern world in our minds, our culture, and our relationships. But here's the part that gives this whole message hope. Jung didn't just diagnose the problem. He offered a path forward, a way to move through the darkness without being destroyed by it, a way to reclaim your inner life, your clarity, and your soul without needing to escape the world or reject who you are. He called that process individuation. 1. What is individuation? Really? At first glance, individuation might sound like a clinical term. But in Jungian psychology, it's one of the most powerful and transformative ideas you'll ever encounter. Individuation is the journey of becoming whole. It's the process of integrating all the parts of yourself, your light and your shadow, your conscious mind, and your unconscious, your outer persona and your deeper truth into a unified, authentic self. In simple terms, it's becoming who you truly are, not who the world told you to be. It's dropping the masks, facing your fears, embracing the messy, hidden, powerful parts of you that you've spent years avoiding, and realizing that those very parts hold the key to your freedom. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real. Task 2. The tools Jung gave us. So how do we begin that journey? Jung believed the unconscious is always trying to communicate with us. The problem is, we rarely know how to listen. But the clues are there if we pay attention. Here are a few key practices Jung emphasized. A. Pay attention to your dreams. Jung saw dreams not as random nonsense, but as direct messages from the unconscious. He wrote, "Dreams are the guiding words of the soul." Every night while your ego sleeps, your unconscious comes alive, offering images, symbols, and emotional messages that reflect the parts of yourself you've ignored or misunderstood. Have you ever had a dream that felt strangely meaningful? Maybe even haunting. That wasn't your brain glitching. That was your soul speaking. Jung encouraged people to write down their dreams, reflect on the symbolism, and ask, what part of me is trying to be seen here? Because often the dream reveals what the waking mind hides. B. Face what you fear. Another step in individuation, facing the parts of yourself that scare you. Jung didn't believe in avoiding discomfort. He believed in turning toward it because the thing you're most afraid to feel is usually where the healing lives. Afraid of rejection. Look at where you abandoned yourself. Afraid of failure. Ask who taught you that your worth is tied to success. Afraid of your own anger. Learn what boundary was crossed long ago. These aren't just emotional wounds. They're invitations. Jung believed that the shadow contains not only your pain, but your power. And until you face it, that power remains locked away, silently shaping your life from behind the scenes. To see, reclaim your soul. Depth. One of Jung's greatest concerns was that modern life had lost its soul. He wasn't talking about religion. He was talking about meaning. He saw how people were becoming more efficient, more productive, more connected, but less centered, less fulfilled, less alive. He believed that part of individuation was reconnecting with the inner world, the symbols, archetypes, instincts, and intuitions that make us human. This could mean slowing down, spending time in nature, creating art that no one else sees, sitting with silence instead of filling it. It's not about escaping the world. It's about rooting deeper into your truth so you can live in the world more fully without losing yourself. Then 3. Individuation is a lifelong journey. Here's what makes Jung's approach so profound. He never promised quick fixes. Individuation isn't a weekend workshop. It's not a 10-step checklist. It's a lifelong dialogue with your soul. And the goal isn't to become someone new. It's to remember who you've always been, beneath the noise, the masks, and the pain. But here's the beauty. Every step you take on that path brings you more energy, more clarity, more inner peace. Not because life gets easier, but because you stop fighting yourself. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop needing validation for your existence. You begin to walk through life with quiet strength because you know who you are. And that is priceless. 4. Why this matters now more than ever. In a world that's obsessed with doing, becoming, performing, Jung's path invites us to return to being. To stop chasing and start listening. To stop reacting and start reflecting, because if we want a different world, we don't start with new systems. We start with new selves. More grounded, more honest, more whole. Jung believed that when enough individuals undergo individuation, the collective consciousness shifts. It's not theory. It's transformation from the inside out. And in a time when everything feels divided, maybe what we need most is people who are no longer divided within themselves. So if you're tired of pretending, performing, and pushing yourself to fit into molds that were never meant for you, maybe it's time to go inward, to dream, to feel, to remember, to ask not, what do I need to fix, but rather what part of me is ready to come home. That's individuation. That's the path. And it's waiting for you. Carl Jung didn't leave us with a prophecy. He left us with something far more powerful, a personal invitation. An invitation to turn inward, to stop blaming the world, and start understanding ourselves. Because real transformation, it doesn't begin with governments or systems. It begins with one person you choosing to wake up. And Jung's message is simple but confronting. If you don't face the shadow within, you will live your life being controlled by it. And you'll call it fate. So ask yourself, have you ever felt the pull of something deeper inside you? A part of you you've ignored, denied, or maybe feared? Have you ever wondered what your life might look like if you stopped running and started listening? If the answer is yes, I invite you to share in the comments. What's one part of yourself you're ready to face? And if this message stirred something in you, hit subscribe. Because this channel is dedicated to exploring the wisdom of Carl Jung, the mysteries of the unconscious and the real work of soul awakening in a noisy world. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about finding yourself beneath the noise, the mask, and the fear. So until next time, stay awake, stay honest, and remember, the journey begins within.